Hello viewers, here is a Honeywell Turbo Fan. This is the older one, it's model HT-800 series, and it was made in 11 of 2004. There's the informations, there's the UL sticker. I've shown these on the channel quite a few times, but I found this one. I usually get these if they're really cheap because I kind of like them. They have a certain nostalgia to them. But I wanted to record this one because it's going to be quite a dramatic cleaning before and after. So let's test it out. Surprisingly, the bearings are still pretty free. But it doesn't move a lot of air. Actually, it's still moving an okay amount, but not nearly what it should be doing. It's gotten to the point where the guard is almost completely blocked up there in the middle. So let's begin to take this apart, and I'm going to address the most common question I get on these fans. What is that bit? It's not a Phillips. I believe it's a hex. I'll get a size here. I'm going to say it's this one maybe. It is. Okay, so it's a T10 hex. So it's got 6 points to it, and the size is T10, T as in telephone. So there's two of those, one here at the top, and there's one at the bottom. And these stupid little things are responsible for quite a few of these fans getting tossed out, because a lot of people don't have these bits on hand. And so when they can't get into it, they just discard it and buy a new one. Which is exactly what these greedy corporations want you to do. But I absolutely refuse to do that. Curiously enough, the newer ones don't have those weird bits, and they're all standard Phillips. Okay, with all those screws removed, the guard should come off. There we go. And you can see just how bad it really is in there. I forgot about this. It's got one of those stupid things on the blades. I'm going to try to tap out these screws just so that they don't fall out later somewhere along the process. Either in the sink or whatever. And these stupid ones, those are just going to go in the scrap bin. I'm not going to put those back in. Those are a waste of time. Come on, get out of there. Okay, so these are the 5 normal screws that I will put back in. Oh no, wait, hold on, that's one no good. 4 screws, that's certainly adequate, so we'll just reuse those. Now, we have a situation here with the blade. The blade is held on by this stupid thing that's not meant to come off, and once it comes off, you usually can't get it to go back on. So, you have to be very, very careful when dealing with these stupid things. And what I usually do is I take a common screwdriver, a very small one, and you'll see there's a flat part of the shaft. Put the screwdriver there, in between that stupid thing and the shaft, and I kind of pry it out slowly, just to the point where it kind of separates a little bit. And then hopefully I can kind of pry it out, towards me, and get it off. And as long as it doesn't break, I'm just gonna, work it off the shaft here. Okay, and so this didn't break, so we'll be able to reuse it, but sometimes, or a lot of times, what happens is it breaks here and here, and it just snaps, and then you can't reuse it. But I think we'll be okay. So if you can get that off slowly and carefully, it's not a problem. Okay, now moving on, we have the blade, which should just pull off now. And this is incredible, look at that. That's really something. And then we have the motor, which is going to be released by the two bottom screws. And we're going to remove this screw up here. And we're going to come around the back, and then we're going to take a common screwdriver and just gently pry up on this knob and take that off. And now the motor should be ready to come out now. And this little plastic piece here holding the wires in will come out. And now we are left with the switch, which will pull forward out. Whoops, the tripod's a little bit loose here. This will kind of pull forward out. I'm pushing on the part where the knob came off of. And then here we have these two wire nuts. And I'm not sure if it's going to be soldered in or not. I'm going to undo these two wire nuts and let's see what it looks like under there. It is soldered in, which is kind of annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look forward in the project and know that in order to get the shaft off or the bearings off later, we're going to have to sand it down, and it needs to be powered on to do that easily. So I'm going to just put this back real quick here. And before we proceed, I'm going to clean the shaft. So I'm going to turn this to on. I'm going to drop this back in place. Just put one screw back in. Okay. I'm going to take a fine sandpaper. Like this. I'm going to plug in the fan, and I'm going to go along the shaft here like this, and clean up any imperfections or rust spots, and I will explain why we're doing this later on in the video, but this is absolutely imperative. You want to do this until you get a nice, smooth, clean, almost like a mirror finish to the shaft. This one's not very rusted, so it won't take long at all. But if your fan is rusty, which sometimes they do get rusty, it'll take longer. That's going to be good enough for this one. Okay, so now we're going to proceed with the disassembly. So we'll remove that screw again that I just put back. And then we're going to remove these wire nuts here. And because they soldered it in, we're going to have to cut the connections. And now the black wire should go to the high side of the cord, which in this case is the top wire. That is the wire with the writing on it. And if we look at the plug, the wire with the writing goes to the high side. So that's how we'll put it back on. I'm going to take some wire cutters here and I'm just going to snip this off. Okay, so now the motor can be separated from the housing. And we're almost done. The last thing we're going to do is remove this strain relief, which we have to do from the back. This is another one of those things that's kind of difficult, and also has to be done in a way that doesn't break anything. So we're going to take a common screwdriver, and I'm going to pull this up a little bit. Ultimately, it's got to go through. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. We're just going to push it down. Okay, that was pretty easy. And now we can pull it through and remove it from the cord. It opens up like this. Take that off the cord, pull that wire through, and now we can take all of this stuff and throw it in the dishwasher, blast it with the garden hose, whatever you want to do with it. Now we're going to service the motor, and we're going to begin by brushing off the heavy accumulations of dust. Okay, now with most of that gone, we're going to remove the bearings so we can lubricate it. That's going to be done with these two screws in the front. And now if the shaft is clean enough, this should slide right out. And if it doesn't slide out, you got to stop and clean it again. Because if you pull it out with resistance, you'll score the inside of the bearing and cause a problem. So that's removed. And now the rear bearing should kind of pull out of place. These do have somewhat of a tendency to break. So I want to be very gentle with this. I'm not even confident exerting the amount of force that's required to remove this. I'll try to pry up on it very, very slowly. I'm going to pay attention to the orientation of the motor, because it has to be assembled the same way, otherwise the shaft will spin the opposing direction to what it does now, and that will not be very useful. So to clean this out, I'm going to take a cleaner Tigger towel and I'm going to kind of put it like this and put it into the bearing. You can see the bearing is very dry, there's no lubrication in there at all. And that's very terrible. So clean that out, and we'll clean this out. And this too is very dry. Okay, and now we'll clean the shaft off. Okay, now we can re-lubricate it, and we can use two different kinds of oil. We can use this oil, the blue can, 3-in-1. Not the black can. The black can is not for fans. It's for a number of other things. But the blue can is for fans. It says it right on the box. You can also use this oil, which is for electric motors. So we're going to use this because I have more of it. And I'm going to put some oil in the wicking here. There's a fiber material around the bearing. I'm going to put the oil on there and let that soak in for a minute. And I'm going to put a couple drops inside the bearing itself. Okay, and if that fiber wick is working correctly, all this oil that's on the surface here should seep in a couple of minutes. I'm going to do the same thing with this side of the bearing, the front. And it worked pretty quickly on this one. I don't know if that was picked up on the video or not, but it sucked right into the... See, it goes right into the material there. So that's good. So that's ready to go. Now we're going to reassemble the motor. I'm going to put the bearing back into place. It says Honeywell on the back. It can go either way, but I'm going to make sure it's, right side up. Put that back where it came from, and then we're going to take the shaft and I'm going to push it into the bearing, and there's going to be some resistance because there's an air gap in there. Not a gap, a pocket, an air pocket. And so we have to kind of push this in to overcome that air pocket, and then it'll sit in the back. And once you've done that, it'll kind of resist pulling out too. So this should be spinning freely at this point, which it is. And now I'm going to take some oil, put it all along this shaft. Not a lot, but enough to fully lubricate it, because the bearing has to slide on over this entire surface. Okay. And now we'll screw it back together. This does not have to go very tight. This is the wrong size bit. Tighten it by hand so we don't strip anything out here. You want this to be an equal tightness between these two screws. After assembly, The shaft may be very stiff. I'm going to wipe the excess oil off here to make it easier to work with. And it is pretty stiff. You can see it's not coasting really at all. And so what we're going to do is take a screwdriver and strike the shaft a couple of times, and that will free it right up. Sometimes I kind of take the shaft and just push it up and down in all different directions, and that will free up the bearings and get it into proper alignment. Okay, so now we're ready to reassemble. We're going to begin by feeding the wire through the hole. And we're going to have to strip this out along with the leads onto the motor. In this case, we're going to go back about somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. I believe it's 18 gauge wire. Okay. Don't like the way that came out. Let's try a gauge larger. 216, because it broke several of the strands, which is not so much a problem with a small powered appliance like this, but it's just good practice to not have broken strands. Okay, so now we have that, and the fan motor. Okay, that did not work correctly. So again, I think what happened here is there was some solder left over the tip of the wire, and so it didn't come off clean. Here we go. That's much better. Okay, and now to reconnect it, I'm going to look at the plug. And this is the high side, the smaller prong, and that is the non-striped side of the wire, or the side with the writing on it. So we're going to go to the other end of the cord. We're going to find the non-striped side, the side with the writing. That's this. And we're going to connect this to the high side of the motor. Like this. And these connections were soldered originally. I don't think that's necessary, so we're not going to redo it that way. You could if you felt so inclined to do so. Why is that not working? Now it's working. Okay, so those are on there good. And now we're going to mount the motor back in place. So I'll pull this wire back through. And the switch, we have to pay some attention to, because we want to make sure that when it sits in there, it's in the right orientation so that the dial faces the numbers, because this can go in 2 different ways. So let's put the knob on here and make sure that it's where it should be. it is, so that's good. Now we just have to, actually before we do anything else, we got to put the strain relief onto the cord, which is this. And so the cord is going to go into here this way, like this, and it's going to be kind of hard to close this because we've moved down on the wire, so we lost the indentation that was there for the last 15 years. So we're going to have to really squeeze that together pretty hard. And then I'm going to put this down like this, and it's going to take some effort to push this through here and get it to close. Actually, that wasn't too bad. Okay, so that's on there now. Going back around to the front, we're going to take our connections and stuff them up there out of the way. This may be a problem. I may have to manipulate this to be a little bit different in the way it sits in here. Let's see. See if we can do it like that. I think that would be satisfactory. This stupid thing isn't having any of it. Well, actually, you know what? That's not an accurate statement. I think that'll be okay. We're gonna go with that. Now we'll put the blade on, and this is where there can be a problem if this thing broke, because sometimes the blade fits on here loosely and you need it. Now this time it's fitting on here pretty firm. Probably could go without it, but since we have it and since it's in relatively decent condition, I'm going to put it back on. Push it down to the bottom and then kind of bend it back the same place I bent it before. Do the opposite. Now it will not come off. Okay, so let's give it a quick test run before we screw the guard back on. There's a knob, that's a problem. Okay. Start low. It already moves significantly more air than it did before on high. Okay, that's working. Now we'll screw the guard back in place, and I am not going to put those flaky screws back in with the weird heads because there's just no reason to. And this bit is the wrong size. I really should change it before something strips out. Oh, jeez. I better not be getting that stupid virus. Well, this is the final product. Looks as good as it did when it was new. May even be a little better because now it has the proper amount of lubrication in it, and a lot of times these ship from the factories without enough lubrication. Okay, I'll start off on low. It's moving a very strong breeze. I know these are, just cheap Chinese plastic fans, but the amount of air they push is really impressive. Okay, and 2. Three. Spin down is kind of short, but it's good enough. Maybe it'll get longer after it runs for a while and the lubrication works its way into the bearings. Okay, that's all for this one.